Hey, I'm Lana from Lana Glowshot Art, and in this video, we will be unboxing the July 2024 SketchBox. In this box, we will be celebrating World Watercolor Month with some fun color mixing and playful watercolor techniques. Ready? Let's go. The surface in this month's box is the Hanamule watercolor bookmark pad, featuring 15 sheets of highly absorbent cold-pressed watercolor paper. We also have the Winsor & Newton Cotman Sketchers Pocket Set featuring 12 half pans, and in addition to the pocket brush that comes in this set, we also have the SketchBox Signature Dual Head Brush with a number 4 round head and a 3/8 inch dagger brush head. The 12 colors in this set include the lemon yellow hue, cadmium yellow hue, cadmium red pale hue, alizarin crimson hue, ultramarine, cerulean blue hue, viridian hue, sap green, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, burnt umber, and Chinese white. With these 12 colors, you'll be able to mix just about any hue imaginable. Using the cerulean blue hue and the dagger brush head, I'm going to warm up by creating as many different types of marks as I can. As I do this, I play around with the long tapered edge of the brush, the point of the brush, and a variety of different pressures and hand positions. Then I flip my brush around and play around with the different kinds of marks I can make with the round brush head. There are so many possibilities. Now let's explore color mixing with this set. Select 2 colors, one warm and one cool. I am using the cadmium red pale hue and the viridian hue. Begin with an odd number of boxes sketched onto your paper. I have 7, but 5 would work just as well. Then on one end, I paint the pure cadmium red pale hue, and on the other, I paint pure viridian hue. We are now going to create a scale of mixtures that transition between these 2 colors, emphasizing really even steps. On your palette, mix together the 2 colors until you create a neutral mixture that is exactly in between. When mixing this color, it might not always require the exact equal mixture of each color, so play around as you're mixing and continue to check in and see if the color is exactly in the middle. After you're happy with this color and have applied it to the center box, you will then create even steps between the neutral and your original colors. To do this, take a bit of your neutral mixture and add a bit of the cool color back into it. If you have 7 boxes, you will need to mix up 2 cooler colors that are even steps between the neutral and the cool color you selected at the beginning. Then repeat on the other side, beginning with your neutral and then adding the warm color back in. As you are painting, either ensure that your color is completely dry before adding the next color right next to it, or leave a little white space between wet colors. If you paint a wet color next to another wet color, you will experience some wet on wet blending effect, which is a fun technique to play around with, but not optimal for a color scale. Next, we have the Jacquard masking fluid, which can be used to reserve or save parts of your watercolor painting. I'm going to demonstrate this over the top of a bookmark that I've already painted and allowed to dry completely. And at the bottom of this bookmark, I've explored some of those wet on wet techniques that I discussed earlier in the video. I apply the plastic applicator tip to the masking fluid and begin to draw. You don't have to press very hard, just allow a little bit to come out at a time. And if you want thicker, bolder lines, you can apply the masking fluid without the applicator tip. So play around with a bunch of different marks and see what you like. Once you're done with your design, allow the masking fluid to dry completely. It'll get a little bit darker and more transparent in color, and it should be dry to the touch. Once dry, you can come over the top and paint, and just paint right over the top of all of the masking fluid. Everything that you've painted over will be reserved in the final piece. Then you'll allow the second layer of paint to dry completely, and once it's dry, you can rub the masking fluid off. There are a few different ways to do this. You can use your finger and roll the masking fluid off, or you could grab a small chunk of kneaded eraser and use this to pull it off as well. Play around and see what technique you like best. This combination of materials is a great way to play around with a bunch of different techniques and to loosen up and get really playful. The last material in this box is the Winsor & Newton fineliner in cool gray. This fineliner is waterproof, so any sketches or details done with this pen will not move when the watercolor washes are applied over the top. It's a light gray color, which makes it a great option for subtle details or even for preliminary sketches. Let's put all of these materials together to create a bookmark inspired by this month's prompt, travel. Using the masking fluid, I began by sketching in the Japanese calligraphy symbol for travel. And I did this right on top of the white paper, so when I paint over the top of it with a blue wash that is going to represent the sky, it's going to appear as if it's just in the clouds. Then I switch over to the cool gray fineliner and I begin to sketch in a temple, referring to this image to help me figure out all the details. I didn't start this with pencil and instead worked really lightly with the fineliner and built it up in layers, refining and adjusting my original sketch. It is 100% okay to make mistakes when you're working with a medium that doesn't erase. The way that you deal with the mistakes is by playfully incorporating them into the original design, or to work in layers and mask mistakes that happened before. And I'm using both of these strategies throughout the sketch of the temple. I use the hatching technique to cover up mistakes and to add shadows and depth. And then here I ended up pulling one level up a little bit higher, and I just allowed those original lines to kind of fall into the background and to build up more detail in the future layers. I then came in with the masking fluid and masked out a couple areas that I wanted to stay white before I came in with the watercolor. My goal for this piece is to be pretty loose, so I start with some light washes in the sky, painting right over the masking fluid, and then avoiding the building. I allow the sky to dry completely, and as I do so, I mix up an orange that I can use in the highlights and the bright areas in the building. Rather than just painting those brightest oranges, I go ahead and lay a light layer down everywhere, and then I'm going to layer some of the darker colors over the top. With these two layers completely dry, I mix up a green using sap green and ultramarine so that it's a nice cool color, and then I map that into the background. It's okay here if a little bit of that paint touches the orange building or the blue sky. They won't have a wet on wet effect because those layers are completely dry. I make the color a little bit brighter in the foreground by adding some of the lemon yellow hue, and that allows me to create more depth with brighter, warmer colors in the foreground and more muted, cooler colors in the background. Once I lightly lay in the roofs using Viridian, I have a layer over the entire painting so that I know where the colors are and where everything is located. This is a great base layer that I can then come over the top with shadows. Lean into the lessons that we learned about mixing colors with different temperatures to create your neutrals. For the shadows in the house, I worked with a combination of cadmium red pale hue and ultramarine. At any point throughout this process, you can use the masking fluid to save and reserve areas that you've already painted. I use the masking fluid to reserve some of those oranges that I painted in the gate, but I didn't lay it down solidly. I allowed there to be some negative spaces so that when I painted over the top with a glaze of a darker color, some of those areas would show through. I leaned into warm colors that had been neutralized with a cooler color so that I could get those deep shadows underneath the roofs of the temple. I then mixed up a very dark color and used this to set the doors and some of the details in a little darker. I then allowed the painting to dry completely before I removed the masking fluid. As I remove the masking fluid, I'm seeing the drawing with those whites reserved and with some of those other areas reserved for the very first time. And it may or may not look exactly how I expected. So I am definitely taking some time to evaluate how it looks all together. And for me, I decided I needed to emphasize some of those details a little bit more. So I grabbed my fineliner and continued to draw and refine until I got this sketch exactly where I wanted it to be. And now this piece is complete. I hope you learned a ton about working with watercolor, and we can't wait to see what you create. So be sure to use the hashtag SketchBoxJuly when you post your work online. For more unboxing videos and tutorials, you can check out our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.